to order the April 4th, 2022 Utility Financial Oversight Committee meeting. Can we get a roll call, please?
Chairperson Johnston, Vice Chair Bowling,
Present?
Member Churchak, Member Bathgate, Member Connect. A quorum is present.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 3 is public comment. Is there any comment from the public? Have there been any emails received by staff? None? Okay. Item number 4, approval of minutes of the January 24th, 2022 meeting. Any questions, motions?
I move to approve the January 24th, 2022 draft meeting minutes of the Utility Finance Oversight Committee.
Second?
Moved and seconded to adopt. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The minutes are adopted. We're just flying. Was I supposed to whack this? Moving on to agenda item 5A, discussion and possible action regarding electing a chairperson and vice chairperson for the Utility Financial Oversight Committee. Is there any comment from staff?
For the record, Andy Hummel, wastewater utility manager. Every year, a chair and vice chair are chosen amongst yourselves to run this committee. It was last done in April of 2021, so it's time.
And the term is for 1 year, correct?
Yes, yep, 1 year. There's many adulations that come with it. So.
Thanks, Andy. Committee members?
Are you willing to still stay as chair?
I'd be happy to stay as chair.
Doing a great job.
Is that a motion? Second?
Second.
Circular, isn't it? There's been a motion to elect Randy Bowling as chair. In a second, all in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Those opposed? Motion carried. Those for vice chair? Entertain a motion.
I honestly don't know what is the procedure if somebody's not here. Is it possible to nominate someone? I'm new to this game.
Well, let's ask our esteemed legal counsel.
Yeah, this is Adam Tully, Deputy DA. Yeah, you've got a quorum present. If they decline to serve, you could address that at your next meeting.
So to answer your question, Jim, yes, you may nominate somebody.
All right, well, I nominate Bob Johnston as the vice chairman of the Utility Finance Oversight Committee for a 1 year term.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded for Bob Johnston to serve as vice chair for a term of 1 year. Those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Those opposed? Motion carried. So that brings us to agenda item 5B, discussion and possible action regarding the tentative fiscal fiscal year 2023 wastewater fund budget, its compliance with adopted financial policies, and recommendation to the Board of Supervisors regarding the tentative wastewater fund budget for fiscal year 2023. I'll turn it over to staff for presentation.
Good morning, Jamie Stevenson, Accounting Manager for the record. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge Courtney Nicholas. She's back there. She is the fiscal analyst for Public Works, and she does a lot of the hard work on these budgets, and we all really appreciate her. There are a few things I want to talk about up front that apply to all three of the utility funds. In revenue, we've included the scheduled rate increases that will be effective July 1st of 2022. Also across all three funds, salaries and benefit increases include our annual contractual increases, an estimated 10% increase to medical insurance, and no expected increase to PERS. Our non-operating income consists mostly of investment income, and we always budget conservatively. For wastewater fund, in operating revenue, we have included those increases that the board approved last year. For salaries and benefits, it increased $121,826 over estimated 2022. Those increases are due to anticipated promotions of employees who are expected to receive certifications, as well as our annual contractual increases. Services and supplies decreased by about $26,000 overall. We had increases to our internal service charges, which are part of the citywide cost allocation plan, and our chemicals. But coupled with decreases to many other services and supplies accounts, we have an overall decrease to services and supplies. Capital outlay planned for wastewater is $5,537,000. Here's a list of the projected capital projects over the next 5 years. The wastewater fund is set to receive $1 million in American Rescue Plan Act funds, which will be tracked in the city's grant fund. So they are not included in the 5-year capital total. If you have any specific questions about projects, I'll refer you to Andy.
Are you ready for questions preceding the capital expenditures, or you want to save them for the end?
Up to you.
If you could go back to the previous slide.
Sure.
The second bullet, as far as the salaries and benefits increases are expected. Increases for expected promotions of employees who receive certifications, as well as annual contractual increases. What type of certifications? Is it water operations?
Yeah, typically that's like an operations or mechanic type position where their next step is based on the certifications that they received, as well as time of service, experience, in some cases other licenses that they may go after, stuff like that. But every year we kind of take a look at our staff and who is likely to be on that next step and plan for that.
Thank you. And then the bullet as far as the internal service charges. Every time there's a tentative budget before this committee, I ask some question about that, and so I will bypass this year. Please continue.
Okay. On to our financial policy compliance. With this slide, you can see that the wastewater utility fund budget for fiscal year 2023 meets all of the city's adopted financial policy requirements. The line graphs represent the financial goals, and the vertical bar graphs represent the projected cash balances. Based on industry standards for the wastewater fund, our operating reserve is 30 to 45 days minimum of operating expenses. The capital reserve goal is calculated at 2% of capital assets. The system reinvestment funding goal is equal to 80% of annual depreciation. Our debt to equity ratio goal is at least 50/50. And our debt service coverage ratio goal is 1.0 or above. Any questions on wastewater fund budget?
Committee members? Thank you.
So that does conclude the presentation for wastewater. So it's your move to make a motion at this time.
Thank
If you
you.
have no further questions.
Again, are there any questions from the committee members?
Not at this
If
moment.
not, I'm happy to entertain a motion.
I move to approve the wastewater fund budget. Is that the right? What's that? Page 25. I move to acknowledge that the tentative water fund budget for fiscal year 2023 is in compliance with the adopted financial policies and to recommend that the Board of Supervisors approve the tentative water fund budget for fiscal year 2023.
By way of clarification, are you referring to the wastewater fund as opposed to the water fund? Which I believe is on,
Wrong one, sorry.
You did. Thank you. for that. I'm so excited.
My bad.
Yeah, that was the wastewater budget
Oops,
that was
sorry.
presented.
No, you're totally fine.
There it is.
11. Yeah, the wastewater fund. Do I need to reread it? Okay, thanks.
is there a second?
Oh, I'm sorry, second?
It's been moved and seconded to acknowledge the tentative wastewater fund budget for FY 2023 in compliance with the adopted financial policies and to recommend that the Board of Supervisors approve the tentative wastewater fund budget for FY 2023. Any further discussion before we vote? The only comment I have is having been on this committee for so many years, it's nice to see, A, that there's financial policy standards, goals, and B, that we're meeting them. So compliments to staff. And with that, those in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. On to agenda item 5C, discussion and possible action regarding the tentative fiscal year 2023 water fund budget, its compliance with the adopted financial policies, and a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors regarding the tentative water fund budget for FY 2023. Staff?
Thank you, Jamie Stevenson, County Manager for the record. For our water fund, with our revenues, as with wastewater fund, our planned rate increases are included in our revenue estimates. Salaries and benefits increased $218,291 over estimated fiscal year '22. Those increases include anticipated promotions of employees receiving certifications, as well as our usual contractual increases. I'd like to let you know that the personnel detail sheet, which is page 29 of your packet, was not updated to include those anticipated promotions. However, the fiscal summary page and the budget detail on pages 30 to 33 of the packet do include those calculations. So the budget detail you'll be taking the motion on is correct. If you'd like an updated copy of that personnel detail sheet, please let me know. I'd be happy to provide that.
I apologize. When you were describing what the errors were, I was still trying to find the page. Could you summarize that again, please?
Sure, of course. So it's page 29. It's the personnel detail sheet. It's a listing of all the positions we have and the amount it's going to cost for each position. That sheet was not updated. but the total numbers in the budget are correct. So I have an updated copy of that sheet if you'd like.
So the total for salaries, wages, and benefits, is it $3,408,000?
Not summed up there. Oh, maybe it helped if I looked at the correct fund.
So on the, we're talking about the water fund here and the water utility. And by the way, this is Pam Ganger, Deputy CFO. And just to step in and help, I know Jamie was looking for her page. So the fiscal summary shows that the total for salaries and just for salaries is $2,191,457. The personnel detail worksheet for the water utility fund shows $2,136,000. So what Jamie is pointing out is that the difference between the two is the promotions, the expected promotions for the individuals in that fund.
Great. Thank
So
you.
the total on the fiscal summary sheet and your budget detail is correct and does include the promotions. It was just the personnel detail worksheet that had not been updated to include those promotions that was missing. So that's all.
Great, thank you.
Okay. For services and supplies, we had a slight decrease of about $8,000 over estimated 2022. Overall, there were increases to our internal service charges, but decreases to other line items, which give us an overall decrease. Our capital spending for fiscal year 2023 is $2,130,000. Here's our 5-year projected capital projects for the water fund. The water fund is set to receive $3 million in American Rescue Plan Act funds that we plan to use on the Quill Treatment Plant project. These funds will be tracked in the city's grant fund, so they're not included in that 5-year total. Additional funds for the Quill Treatment Plant are included in the fiscal year 2022 budget, as we have received $7 million in 2022A water bonds to be used for that project. Since we received those funds in fiscal year 2022, we've included the expenses for that project in our 2022 budget as well. Those budgets will roll forward to the 2023 budget during our first round of augmentations. The 2022A water bonds also included refunding of our 2012 water bonds in the amount of $9,690,000. For our financial policies, the FY23 water fund budget meets all the city's adopted financial policy requirements. That spike you see in the blue capital reserve bar in 2019 represents an increase in cash due to the receipt of our 2018B water refunding bonds and bond monies received for use of the East-West Transmission Project. As I mentioned before, we just received those 2022 water bonds for refunding and use on the Quill Treatment Plant. So we expect to see that spike again in our 2022 actual, as we won't have spent many of those bond proceeds before year end. The operating reserve is 60 to 90 days minimum of operating expenses. That's different than the wastewater fund, which was 30 to 45 days. Are there any questions on water fund budget?
Committee members, questions?
Yes, Jim Bathgate for the record. On the personnel detail worksheet, under benefits, I'm curious, what is a foul weather allowance?
Yeah, Eddie Qualieri for the record, water utility manager. That's foul weather gear for rain coats and, when they're out there working in the rain.
So that's not included in the clothing allowance? That's
It's separate.
separate?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Any other questions? I'll entertain a motion.
I'll do it right this time. I move to acknowledge that the tentative water fund budget for fiscal year 2023 is in compliance with the adopted financial policies and to recommend that the Board of Supervisors approve the tentative water fund budget for fiscal year 2023.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded to acknowledge that the tentative water fund budget for FY 2023 is in compliance with the adopted financial policies, and to recommend that the Board of Supervisors approve the tentative water fund budget for FY 2023. Any further discussion? Seeing none, is those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item 5D, as in Delta, discussion and possible action regarding the tentative fiscal year 2023 stormwater utility fund budget, its compliance with adopted financial policies, and a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors regarding the tentative stormwater utility fund budget for FY 2023. Staff?
Okay, for our stormwater fund. Operating revenue, again, includes those scheduled rate increases approved by the Board of Supervisors. In the future, we're going to see stormwaters continue to rise as the rate increase has a scheduled rate increase for July 1st of each year. Our salaries and benefits increased about $17,000 over estimated 2022. Those increases can just be attributed to our annual contractual employee increases and our expected increases to benefits. Services and supplies had a slight increase of $6,000 from estimated 2022 due to our slightly higher internal service charges. Planned capital outlay for stormwater fund is $505,000. Here's our list of projected capital projects over the next 5 years. The city plans to use American Rescue Plan Act funds to fund stormwater projects in fiscal year 2023 in the amount of $1,465,000. Those will be tracked in the grant fund, so they're not included in that 5-year total.
For the ARPA funds, is there a matching requirement?
Do you know that?
Local match?
No, there is not.
Thank you. Could you go back to the preceding slide, please?
Sure.
For the operating revenue in the rate increases, I'm curious the impact of the previous year's plan of measured increases over a longer period of time, so there's a reasonable sense of expectation on the part of the ratepayer as well as what staff can utilize in addressing the stormwater demands.
So yes, Andy Hummel, wastewater utility manager for the record. So this last year was our first, this current year that we're in was our first increase and the complete rework of our rate structure. So at this point, people are used to getting the new bill. We've had essentially, we're in our third quarter of that. We did have some hiccups along the way transitioning to a completely new structure. We also made the wonderful decision to completely change to a whole new billing system at the same time. And those ended up coinciding pretty well same timing. So we did have some lag on the stormwater utility side as far as some of those customers not going to their new structure on July 1. We had to drag that for a couple of billing cycles as we were transitioning from the old to the new. Just the sheer amount of work it would have been to go in and on the old system, update those versus then do it again on the new system. The manpower really didn't weigh in on the benefit there. But at this point, everybody is on that new system, and we've conservatively budgeted for this next year, anticipating we'll probably receive a higher revenue than what's in that budget, but wanted to stay conservative just in case.
So the torturous analysis that staff and their consultant did, I think over the discussions held at this committee, I'm thrilled with the end result, and I hope that it wasn't too detailed, sort of put an administrative burden on staff, but it sounds like it's addressed and we're moving forward in the right direction.
Yes, that's correct. We're now just moving on, and it'll be now just change that rate for those affected parcels, or the rate classes essentially each July 1, instead of reworking every single parcel in the
Great.
future. Yeah.
Thanks, Andy. Does that conclude your presentation?
Okay, for our financial policies, the tall blue bars for capital reserves in 2019 and 2020 reflect the receipt of our 4.8 million stormwater bonds that we received late in fiscal year 2018. Those funds have all been spent. The stormwater utility budget for FY23 meets all the city's adopted financial policy requirements. Industry standards for the stormwater fund operating reserve is 45 days minimum of operating expenses. And that's all I have for stormwater. Any questions?
Thank you. Any questions from the committee?
It's very thorough.
Do you entertain a motion?
I move to acknowledge that the tentative stormwater utility fund budget for fiscal year 2023 is in compliance with the adopted financial policies, and to recommend that the Board of Supervisors approve the tentative stormwater utility fund budget for fiscal year 2023.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded to acknowledge that the tentative stormwater utility fund budget for FY 2023 is in compliance with the adopted financial policies, and to recommend to the Board of Supervisors, and to recommend that the Board of Supervisors approve the tentative stormwater utility fund budget for FY 2023. Any further discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion adopted. That brings us to agenda item 6. Thank you, staff. Great presentations. Reports from the managers?
So again, Eddie Qualieri for the record, Water Utility Manager. I'm going to go through our water projects updates, our studies we've been working on, and then just general staffing updates. Heading into our busy season here, demands were picking up, although I looked at the weather just a second ago and it looks like we're going back into freezing territory next week. So that'll help us actually. So, demands have picked up. As you know, the snowpack is a little below average this year, not getting a lot of snow after December. Luckily, the weather stayed pretty cold there, so we're seeing flows in the Carson River, not that it impacts us a lot, but staying pretty on average, which is interesting with the less snowpack. So it means that the snow is just staying up there longer that we got in December, which is good. But so moving on to capital projects, we've installed permanent generators, well 55, 24, 41, and 3. Those are all online and working. In that time at 24 and 41, we put in new motor control centers and soft starters. So we took the time while they were offline to upgrade the electrical systems for the motors. Well 44 is, rehab is done. We're hopefully getting that well back online here in the next couple weeks after being offline for 5 years. So that'll be a nice upgrade. It's a smallerish well, 350 GPM, but still, it's good to get these, wells that we've, turned off back online. Water line replacements, we're finishing up the Highway 50 bike path, if you've seen that by the O'Reilly's over there. That's being finished up in the next couple weeks. And that's just getting ahead of a new NDOT path that's going in there. We replaced an old steel main there. Water tank rehabs, we're dead in the middle of rehabbing Gonai Canyon tank. That's a 400,000 gallon tank. The project's going really well. They're looking to be done here at the end of April. We can get it, it'll take us about a month to get it back online, hopefully less. But you have to fill it, drain it, test it, fill it again, et cetera. So we're on schedule to have that back online before demands really pick up, which is good. Quill Water Treatment Plant, that is the new design contract, which basically takes it from 15% to 100, and through bidding, is going to the board on April 21st. We're working out the cost currently as we speak with the vendors or the consultants, and we're going to bring that to the board on the 21st. So that is progressing nicely, and even during this time, the work has continued for the project, so we're not losing much time. Water studies, we've wrapped up a couple of those that I've presented on in the past. The Lakeview Timberline Pump Station study, we've thoroughly vetted that system and looked to see in the future what we need there, and it's quite a bit of work, but we have a few projects coming out of it that we can tackle right up front. So we have our plan set for those pump stations going up those two separate chains. Iron and manganese treatment study, that is looking at the iron and manganese that we have on the east side of town, mostly affected on the east side of town, but also on the central part of town. And we have a couple projects that will improve that issue we have coming out of that study that wrapped up recently. We've done some rehabilitation programs. They're kind of for our own tracking of our rehabs for wells and tanks. We also have one started for the pressure reducing valves. But we've wrapped up the well rehab program, and we have those wells on schedule to be rehab, and we're currently in the middle of the tank rehab program. So that one's kicked off, and we have a pretty good idea of what's coming up for those, so we can stay on track of our CIP. The revised lead and copper rule is coming out soon in the next couple months, and that's basically for every utility drinking water in the country. But they have to map out their service lines, both the utility service line and the customer service line. And you have to prove that you don't have lead in those service lines. We've started you need to map it, you need to have a database so customers can look up what they have. It's thorough. Getting our side done is a task, and then getting the customer side done is an even bigger task because we don't know what they've done to it or what they have in the ground because we don't own and operate that side of the service. So, but we have our meters GPSed. We're building off our database, and we're on our way to meeting the 2024 deadline on the rule that we still don't have the full rule yet. So that'll be coming soon, but we're staying on top of that. Staffing, we've had one operator left to start his own excavation business. So we've backfilled that operator with an internal candidate we had or internal employee we had from California that came over with a lot of production experience. That's on our treatment production side. So he's moving right in. We've been training him as he worked as a meter. So it's kind of a seamless transition for him. And we're happy to have him. His name's Joe Gobert. And then Brandon Mathisen, he's been our foreman for the last 25 years. And he's retiring at the end of November. So we're gonna hire his replacement preemptively in April this month, hopefully. And most likely it's gonna be an internal hire, and we'll have that employee shadow Brandon throughout the summer. So he's ready to jump in there when Brandon leaves. So those are our staffing updates, and I'll take any questions.
Committee members?
I just had a,
Cindy?
how often are you guys going to be rehabbing your PRVs?
Well, it'll be which ones can we rebuild probably, but we check them, every month. We're in there checking them, and if they need rehab, if there's something going on, we jump in and get it done. This is more of a like a global look at what do we have out there. Can we get away with check valves in some of them, take out some of the complexity and maintenance out of them? We've already identified a few where we can. So that just makes things a lot simpler. But it's looking at it globally and saying, what do we have in the ground and where's our schedule here? Instead of, hey, this looks pretty bad, let's get in and get it cleaned up and fixed. The guys do a pretty good job of maintaining them. It's just getting it in a plan, out of their heads and into a plan. So, yeah, it's a big task. We have, about 60 of them out there in vaults. So.
Any other questions, Cindy?
The other one I had was, how concerned are you about the lead and copper rule? Like, is it just more the older west side that you guys?
I'm not concerned in Carson. We've never found lead. They call them pigtails or goosenecks. That we haven't found any of it in our system. So, not concerned about finding any. It's just the fact we have to prove, even though we sample and all that stuff, we have to now prove that it's not out there, even though we meet the standards of the testing and sampling. So it's just another thing coming out of the Flint, Michigan crisis. So.
Jim?
Yeah, my question is also on the revised lead and copper rule. I didn't completely understand. Are you saying there's one portion of it you can control and some part you can't?
Yeah.
Can you elaborate a little bit?
Yeah, so the utility, other than the piping in the street that we own, we also own and service the pipe that goes from the main to the meter. At the end of the meter box is the customer's responsibility. So the pipe going from the end of the meter into their house. That's theirs. We don't fix their side, we don't replace it, etc. So, but, we have to document what's on our side, and then we have to somehow figure out what they have on their side and put it all into this database.
Okay, thanks.
Usually the lead in the Midwest where it was from the main, it was a bendable pipe that connected the service line to the main. And that's usually where they found it. And, places like in Ohio, they've been replacing lead service lines for a long time. So we have yet to find anything like that in the ground.
Thank you.
Could I have whoever's manning the PowerPoint go back one slide? Thank you. Are you seeing real challenges, Eddie, in staffing? I mean, to get valid, good quality candidates?
I'll let you know here shortly. We've got so Joe, who went over to replace Ted, was in meters. And so we're now have a meter tech open to the public. So I'll find out here what it's like. We've been lucky to not have to hire anybody in 6 or 8 months now. I believe 8 months was the last time we hired somebody. So we've had a pretty good steady crew and haven't had to deal with that. I hear it's terrible though, as you probably have to. Mm-hmm. We'll see. I mean, when we were hiring that person, for a meter tech, we used to get 80 applications, and I think the last time we got 10, and that was 8 months ago. So we'll
Good
see
luck.
Yeah, thank you.
On that same slide, are you replacing the generators? And I apologize, I should know where these wells are, but could you tell me where well 55, 25, 41, and 3 are?
Yeah, of course. So 55's the well up by the WNC. It's one of those in that line. If you
Okay.
walk down that path, it's the first one off of College there. 24 is on Fifth Street. That's in Riverview area. 41 is one of the river wells. If you walk that river path, you'll see right along the river. It's one of those. It's the one to the south. And then well 3 is on Winnie. That's the new one we just re-drilled. Some of you, Jim went out to it. So those weren't replacements. Those are brand new installs.
Okay.
There
The reason,
was no generator at those sites.
by way of background, I was just curious if there's any conclusions that you can draw as far as the placement of where these wells are. But it sounds like it's just whenever the,
It was strategic in the sense we placed them in wells that were connected to different zones of the system so that we could supply those different zones with backup power. That's how I believe how they selected and on the size of the well, the bigger wells. Now, 24 happens to be right next to Andy's lift station, so we were able to combine that generator to operate both, the lift station and the well.
okay,
So we got a
good.
twofer out of that one.
Thank you.
Okay, on the wastewater side, much like Eddie was talking on the irrigation side, we're starting to see demands pick up for the season. I'm assuming all the golf courses will go nuts this week, and then how quickly can we turn off next week when it gets cold is normal for the season. But the reservoir, we store the water throughout the winter for reuse in the spring and summer. We're starting this year at the same level as we did last year. So with the drought that we're in, we're holding steady there. So that's a good thing. In terms of wastewater capital projects, the Long Street pipeline replacement, that portion of the project is complete. It'll be paved here once we hit good weather for the paving season. And then over in the Robinson area of town, our pipeline replacement there is still going. Basically replacing the old main in the street and then tying laterals, replacing and tying them over to the new main for the residences in there that are on that. And then the wharf electrical upgrades, that one's kind of a long term as we're working through all the submittals and actually acquiring the parts for that project. We're anticipating a summer start at this point. Parts are selected and on order. Now it's just the manufacturing and procurement process that is with everything on the electrical side taking some time. A couple of them not on the list. Center Drive, that one, we will be beginning some pipeline installation down in that area in the next month or so. That one is actually a roadway project, but we got some sewer pipeline with that and is a septic conversion area. So although only about 6 to 7 residences would actually benefit from that, it is a start. And then as Eddie mentioned, the well 24 in the Riverview area, that one with that generator. We had a generator at that site for the lift station itself, a smaller one. So with that, we were able to get rid of that one out in the street. It was an older one ready to retire anyway, so we were able to combine and consolidate there and get an obstruction out of the middle of the street as well. On the wastewater study side, last time we talked about the quick assessment program that we started. We're within weeks of that being done. It's going pretty quickly in the south end of town. If you happen to see them, a couple little pickups with RH Borden on the side, and they're just jumping manhole to manhole, probably spending more time talking to neighbors coming out wondering what's going on than it's actually taking them to do. But they're working very quickly, and we've found some areas that weren't even on the radar of lines that needed to be cleaned. But overall, we're seeing that the system's in pretty good shape flow-wise, so we were happy with what we're seeing. And then that second bullet item, monitoring dewatering separation pilot testing at Tumwharf. And what this is on the solid side, for those of you who've been to the plant recently and took the tour, we separate solids in the initial stages at the plant. Those go into our digesters and then to dewatering and off the landfill. And
Just for
then,
clarification, Tim
Yes.
Wharf is Truckee Meadows?
Yep, Truckee Meadows Water Reclamation Facility. There are the facility in Sparks at the eastern end of town there. And then the other half of the separation that we do is in our bioreactor. Once the bugs have done their job, we separate some of those out and get rid of them to try to keep new ones growing. Those also go through that same process of going to the digesters, getting broken down, and then getting dewatered and sent to the landfill. And they see some of the same hurdles that we see in terms of trying to get your nitrogen levels down, your phosphorus, things like that. They're much more strictly regulated than we are since they go directly to the Truckee River. But what they're trying is actually taking those two sources of solids, and they're taking the waste bugs essentially, and they're not even putting them, going to try to not put them through the digestion process. So when they do that, that's where everything that those bugs have essentially eaten gets released back into the water. They're going to just dewater them directly and send them to the landfill as well. So we're watching that. The hope is that those nutrients stay with the bugs. That's what should happen as they get dewatered, and so they're not released back into the water for further treatment, and should lower the nutrient loading. So we're watching that pretty closely to see if that works for them and would possibly work for us. So, and then on the staffing side, we did hire an operator recently. Corey Walls came to us from Lyon County Utilities, started this morning actually. As Eddie was saying, as he's starting to do some hires again, we did see a definite lull for a while of people just not applying. But with this last position, it seemed to have picked back up on the number of applicants we got, and good applicants that, fit what we were looking for. In the interviews we had, the 4 people we interviewed, all 4 of them were, this is somebody we'd be happy to get just one normally. So we were very happy with that. So it seems like it's getting better, hopefully.
That's good news.
Yeah, that's what we thought. Yeah.
Any questions from the committee members?
The dewatering separation pilot testing, is this strictly something for environmental health benefits or whatever? Are there any cost savings of anything if this is adopted here?
But there could be, it's hard to say on the cost. They're looking at that as well. If that affects their ability to disinfect and possibly lowers chemicals, that could help. It could increase cost potentially because the bugs aren't breaking down, so you have a little bit more material to actually dewater. So it could affect it there, but that's kind of why we're watching it to see what that overall net benefit cost is. But nitrogen is very hard to remove from the water, and when the bugs break down and release that back into the water, that water gets sent right back to headworks to the treatment train. So if we can intercept that and keep it from having to go back through, then that should help reduce our costs there.
Thank you.
I do have a question on the impacts of any drought. Several years ago, there was insufficient reuse to meet the contractual demands of, is it 4 entities receiving the reuse?
Yes.
And that amount had to be supplemented by water. Any expectation or anticipation of that type of situation occurring this year? Or is it too early to tell?
It's kind of too early to tell. If we get some more spring storms, as we often do in April and May, that'll definitely help us. The other thing we're looking at, apologies, Eddie, don't remember the name of the well off the top of my head. 38, down on Snyder, is right across the street from the prison farm. That well is high in nitrates in the water, still usable by the water system, but it's high enough where we have to flush that well a lot anyway. So we're looking at a project right now actually to be able to tie that well over through gravity and get it into the system there, into the prison farms effluent system, and offset the usage, and be able to then also, typically the way to deal with nitrates is just pump the well and waste the water essentially to flush it. And this way we could use that water beneficially in our system and help offset that. So we're tracking that, and we're also, if we, monitoring if the reservoir levels look like they're going to get low and we need to supplement, then we'll track that.
Great. That's all I have on the wastewater. Staff have any other on wastewater or other areas, stormwater?
On the stormwater side, I didn't prepare a slide there, but really the big highlight is with the rate study. We already talked about the implementation and the fun we've had with that, but seems to be moving smoothly now. We were talking internally, we may look at, have our consultant come back in this next year and just kind of overview, do we look like we're kind of meeting the goals of what we set in the rate study and the customer basis, things like that. And then also we did, with the rate study, ask for 2 stormwater techs. We got the first one this last year, and then that second one we've asked for with this upcoming budget.
Just out of curiosity, what would a stormwater tech do?
They're basically doing the maintenance in the field.
Ah, okay.
Yep.
Thank you. Anything else from staff?
No.
Committee members? How about future agenda items? Do any of the committee members, would they like to see future agenda items? I'll ask staff as well, is there anything that we as a committee can do to support the efforts of staff in increasing the efficiency?
No, I think just your support through this process and, coming out, touring the facilities, staying up to speed on what we're doing, that's very helpful.
Great, we look
Yeah.
forward to it.
Yeah.
Well, I think unless the committee members have anything on agenda item 6, we'll move to agenda item 7, which is public comment. Any comments from the public? Seeing none. We'll move on to, unless final action items.
Well, is this an appropriate time to just make a general comment?
Absolutely.
I just want to tell you how much I appreciate what you guys do. I love how clearly presented this material is. I'm quite the rookie at trying to figure out what it is you do and how this all comes together. And the detail, fantastic. Presentation once again, wonderful. Really appreciate it.
I'll echo that I think the economical use of terms and information is appreciated. Not to say there isn't a load of stuff that we are handed as backup material. So with that, I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you.